The late spring in Pennsylvania is difficult to predict at times. This April has been unusually rainy and warm. Usually, I am forced to mow the lawn for the first time in early to mid-May, but not this year. At least it is not snowing. This time last year, we had a blizzard that dropped 6 inches on the area. I suppose having to mow the lawn early is worth avoiding snow, and with tax season being over, it felt great to be outside in the sunlight. My house has an interesting feature in that the backyard slopes down significantly, leading to a small stream and woods behind us. When the house was built, the front was leveled with the road using backfill. This created a sharp slope about halfway down the side of the house, revealing the basement in the back. This allowed for the installation of a double-wide service door, so I could store the mower and other lawn equipment there instead of cluttering up my garage. It was one of my favorite features of the house. After finishing with the mower, everything was back in place. I have allergies to grass, so I was eager to go upstairs and take a shower. As I was almost at the top of the stairs, I heard my wife's voice. I had seen her friend's car when I was mowing the front, so I was not surprised to hear voices. But then I heard what was being said, and it made my hand pause as I reached for the doorknob. I should have started by introducing myself. My name is Robert Crane, but I prefer to go by Bob. In school, I was nicknamed Hogan after the actor Robert Crane, who played the lead on Hogan's Heroes. I did not mind, but the show was off the air before I was born, so it does not really count as a pop culture reference anymore. I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with a degree in accounting, still being called Hogan. I obtained my CPA in the minimum required time after leaving school, and currently work for a large firm in Philadelphia as a team leader, performing audits and other tasks. It may not be the most exciting position, but it pays well and allows me to see the inner workings of many companies. I have a particular talent for forensic analytics, which involves building a financial trail to investigate things like fraud and money laundering. I am becoming known as an expert in this field and have even been asked to consult with the FBI on 2 cases. My wife Kelly was a dual major in political science and business, planning to pursue her law degree when we met at the start of our junior year. I was waiting for the first day of class when she walked in. Kelly has a tall, slim figure like a ballerina, but with a slightly larger chest. Her long, strawberry blonde hair hung loosely around her bare shoulders, making her look lovely. She was wearing a pretty sundress with sandals that highlighted her beautiful, firm legs. The combination of innocence and sexuality was overwhelming. I was instantly attracted to her. Unfortunately, Kelly did not sit next to me or get assigned to me in a group project. It took me 4 weeks to approach her and break the ice. I made a silly joke and she laughed. It wasn't a dainty giggle, it was a full-out laugh. We started talking, and I asked her if she wanted to go for coffee after class. "I've been waiting for you to ask for 4 weeks," she answered with a smile. The last 2 years of college, we were rarely apart. Our parents weren't too pleased, but we moved in together for our senior year. They saw how devoted we were to each other, and soon enough, they adjusted to it. I couldn't see how it could get any better, but it did. I graduated and immediately landed a job with one of the larger public accounting firms in Philadelphia. I was making a significant amount of money for a recently graduated 22-year-old. Kelly was accepted into Penn's law school, so we stayed in our student apartment. My company offered to pay for my MBA, so I took classes too. I took SEPTA to work every day, so a car wasn't necessary, and it helped cut down on expenses. 3 years later, Kelly graduated, and I proposed during her celebration dinner in the middle of Morton's Steakhouse in Rittenhouse Square. 6 months later, we were married. Kelly took a position as a deputy district attorney in the Bucks County Prosecutor's Office, which is north of Philly. We decided to buy a house in Doylestown, which was the county seat, and hosted the courthouse. It was also the end of the regional rail line, so I could simply ride the train to work every day. It was an 80-minute one-way commute, but it was better than trying to drive on the Schuylkill Expressway, also known as the Schuylkill Expressway or I-95. Kelly and her mother found the house. It was a great starter home with 3 bedrooms. One bedroom would be set up as an office with 2 desks. I would occasionally telecommute and Kelly needed her own space for her legal work. The other bedroom would be a guest room, and of course, the final room was our master bedroom. It was also not too far from her parents' house. Kelly sold me on it as built-in babysitters for when we have kids. I was an only child and always wanted siblings. Kelly and I had discussed having kids as far back as our junior year, and agreed to wait until Kelly had time to settle into her career before we started trying. But now we had reached that point, and 2 nights ago we agreed to stop Kelly's birth control and start trying to have a child. I was happier than ever before, and that was when what I heard caused my hand to pause on the doorknob. Hogan and I have decided that it's time for me to get pregnant, Kelly announced in an excited squeal. This set off her friend Olivia Watkins. The 2 women made the same high-pitched noise that made me wonder about whales accidentally beaching off the Jersey Shore, trying to reach them. As I stood on the stairs, I grinned at their excitement that matched my own at becoming a father. I was again reaching for the knob when I heard the question that wiped that grin off my face and the happiness right out of me. "That's wonderful, Kelly," Olivia said. "But what are you going to do about Paul?" Kelly hushed her friend. "Hogan is outside mowing the lawn." There was a pause, and I could almost see her looking around for me to pop up. Then she started talking again. "I've already told Paul that I am ending the affair." He was fine with it. With Grossman stepping down from his Senate seat, Paul thinks he has a real shot at it. Getting caught having an affair with a married employee would be a big no-no. Just that simple. 3 sentences destroyed my world. Paul Evans was Kelly's boss in the DA's office. He was a widower in his mid-40s. His wife, Ann, died of breast cancer, leaving behind him as a single father to their daughter, Barbara. Paul was a real political animal, and Kelly had regaled me with stories of his maneuvers within his party to run for higher office. I guess I just found out how my wife got access to all that under-the-covers information. Really, Olivia? Kelly said just going cold turkey. You've been hot and heavy for 6 months and you're just gonna give up the stud muffin? The teasing doubt in her voice made me want to rip Olivia's head off. She'd been a classmate at Penn, and I knew her before Kelly. I knew Kelly and Olivia were now best friends, but I always thought she was still my friend, too. I guess I was wrong about that. "Stop," Kelly protested with a giggle. "You are so bad. Paul is a great lover, but he was just a bit rough to play with. I love Hogan, but Paul just took me and used me however he wanted. There was no love, just raw sex and power. Now that Bob and I are going for a baby, I don't want to take any chances. I love Hogan and will be a good and faithful mother." How many more cliches were we going to have here? I wondered. All I needed was to come home and find a strange car in the driveway and find them sleeping in my bed to make it complete. I wanted to run into the room and scream. I wanted to smash up the room, but my muscles were locked in paralysis. I was so stunned I couldn't move. My heartbeat was pounding in my ears. "So cold turkey?" Olivia prodded again, Kelly's giggle. "Well, not cold turkey," she admitted. "I have a conference next week with Paul in Pittsburgh. We'll have our goodbye sex out there. I'll miss the sex, but Hogan and the baby are more important." I couldn't take it anymore, but I didn't know what to do. I love Kelly, but this was killing me. My business training started to kick in then. I needed to step back and think. I needed to plan. I started stomping on the steps like I was coming up the stairs. Then I opened the door and stepped into the kitchen. Kelly and Olivia were sitting there with their teacups in front of them. Was that a hint of guilt I saw on Kelly's face? "Honey, are you okay?" she asked in a concerned voice. I realized then that my cheeks were coated in tears. "Allergies," I grunted. "Gonna be a bad spring." "Well, you go upstairs and take a shower. Just drop those clothes outside the bathroom and I'll wash them right away so they're not contaminating your closet. I bought you a new box of Claritin D last week that is in the medicine cabinet." "Thanks." I managed to get out as I made my way towards the stairs. I needed time to think. The next morning was a Monday, and I used the excuse of an early meeting to be up and out of the house before Kelly was out of bed. I'd used my allergies as a reason to go to bed early the night before because my emotions were in an uproar. As I sat on the train, I thought again about what I'd heard. On one hand, my wife was unfaithful, but was ending it as purely sexual to stay with me and have my child. Some would argue that I should let it go at that, and be happy that my wife was coming back to the marriage planning to be a good wife and mother. However, there is a voice in my head that says if she did it once, what will stop her from doing it again in the future? 10 years on, with the kids in school, would she have another just sex affair? Then a divorce would have kids involved, where Kelly would most likely get the kids, and I'd get a large alimony and support bill. As an accountant and business analyst, I had to think in terms of risk and reward. I found myself doing the same thing here. It came down to the fact my trust in my was completely destroyed. The just sex excuse misses what is the truly important issue in these cases. It is the total lack of respect it shows for the partner. The cheater knows what they are doing is wrong and would hurt the other person. Otherwise, they would be doing it in the open, and I would have known all along. Don't get me wrong, I don't think I would have ever accepted her sleeping with Don, but at the very least, if she had talked to me about it, some respect would have been shown. Kelly's actions proved to me how much she really respected me. I worked my day, but part of my brain was focused on what I should do. I had no evidence, aside from my overheard conversation. I hadn't even noticed anything different in the last 6 months that this affair was apparently going on. A direct confrontation without evidence would be a high risk with little possibility of reward. Kelly would deny. Paul Evans would deny. Getting any case through the courts would be financial suicide, as every judge, politician, and lawyer in the surrounding counties knew Evans. I'd get buried to keep his name clean. I thought about just leaving and starting over again somewhere else. It was tempting, but the house would be like an anchor around my neck. Kelly couldn't afford it on her salary alone, and we barely had any equity. She would have to unload it almost immediately to stay out of foreclosure. Foreclosure was highly unlikely in today's market. It would not only damage my credit, but also my partner's. As a CPA with a poor credit score, it would be difficult to secure a new position. How could I be trusted with other people's money when I couldn't handle my own? I needed evidence before taking any action. I eventually obtained it, but from an unexpected source. 3 days later, I was still struggling to find any proof to support what I had heard. Her personal laptop was clean, and there were no secret email accounts or hidden items that could incriminate her. Then Kelly called me at work to inform me that we were invited to a political party at Paul Evans' home on Friday night. I assumed this was his announcement for his candidacy for the U.S. Senate seat. I entertained the thought of a big reveal, but I still had no evidence. We arrived on time for the event at Evans' large mansion near Washington Crossing, which even had a small horse farm. As we entered, there stood the man himself, Paul Evans, at the head of a receiving line like he was a king. As a widower, Evans had no wife to play hostess, but he had clearly recruited his 21-year-old daughter for the role. She greeted guests as if she had been born into it. When it was our turn, Evans gave Kelly a wide smile and exclaimed, "Kelly, you made it! How wonderful!" He then gave my wife a chaste kiss on the cheek before turning to me and saying, "Robert, it's excellent to see you again. I would be lost without your wife, but I understand I will have to give her up soon when you start to expand your family." He chuckled at his own joke and added, "Just let me have her back when you're done with her, and there will be no hard feelings." Kelly blushed while I wanted to confront this smarmy man. I understood his innuendo, which he clearly thought had gone over my head. "Who knows what the future will bring?" I replied in a flat, neutral tone. Not hostile, but not friendly either. It was the same way I would report an audit result. Evans seemed taken aback, and Kelly elbowed me, muttering about being rude. He smoothly turned to the next guest, leaving us with his daughter. Kelly was a stunning woman, but Barbara Evans was a vision. Even in my inner rage, I couldn't help but notice her dark red hair and brilliant smile, which reminded me of a young Maureen O'Hara. While Kelly had the figure of a busty ballerina, Barbara could have been on a pin-up swimsuit calendar next to Kate Upton. She had the perfect combination of good looks, a healthy figure, and flawless hair and skin that photographers often had to use Photoshop to achieve. Paul Evans had a perfect triple threat political family. He looked the part of the wise statesman and family man. His loss of his wife to cancer provided the perfect cover. She was idolized, and any opponent attacking her was asking for career suicide. Barbara was the princess, homecoming queen, a senior at Penn majoring in business and pre-law, and a former gymnast, now a member of the Penn cheerleading squad. According to Kelly, Barbara planned to try out for the Eagles cheerleading squad at their next open call, as she had just turned 21. With a sainted deceased wife and a smart, beautiful, photogenic daughter, the press would love him in a campaign. "Robert," Barbara exclaimed in an excited tone as she gave me a big hug. This wasn't a polite party hug, it was a full-on body squeeze. Parts of her were squashed against me in a most agreeable manner. "You look great! No wonder Kelly has been hiding you away. You never come to any of our parties. You shouldn't work so hard, it's bad for your health." Somehow she managed to say all of that in one breath. My mood had gone from furious to completely shocked in less than a second. I made a few polite noises about how wonderful she looked, and was about to move away when two things hit me. First, Barbara never greeted Kelly. And second, what parties? Kelly didn't give me a chance to ask, as she jumped in with her own greeting to the younger woman. Then we had no choice but to give way to the next guests in line. As Kelly and I wandered off to mingle, I couldn't help but wonder what Barbara knew. After getting my wife a drink, I asked what parties was Barbara talking about. Kelly merely smiled and snorted dismissively. She was just teasing the little brat. "Paul has team meetings and strategy sessions here sometimes. He says he thinks better with a drink in his hand. And you never know who might be in the next booth at a bar. She's been home a few times when we've met here. Don't tell anyone, but Paul let her drink at home even before she turned 21. Well, that gave me the where. The bastard was cheating with my wife right here at his house under the guise of team meetings. They could even be real meetings where Kelly was the last to leave, or possibly left first and returned after everyone else had left. That would keep a team of lawyers from speculating on why Kelly always stayed behind to help the boss clean up. With a dead wife and a daughter off to college, he had no need to find a discreet hotel room, hence no records of their meetings. "So Barbara attends your team meetings?" I asked. Kelly waved the question off. "No. She's been home a few times when classes were canceled. She's just teasing her father about having parties during working hours." She tugged on my arm. "Come on, love, buy your bride a drink." For the next hour, Kelly was never more than a foot away from me. We talked to a number of her coworkers, and a few brought up our plans to have a child, and how sorry they would be to lose Kelly for a time, but how excited they were for Kelly and me. Frankly, I found it a bit awkward. Why did all these people know our plans? After an hour, Paul Evans called for everyone's attention. His daughter stood smiling by his side. He started off by thanking everyone for coming, and then launched into his big campaign announcement. Everyone expected it, but acted excited anyway. I noticed the publisher of the local paper with one of his reporters nearby, taking notes. I am sure it will make a big spread in tomorrow's paper. I won't bore you with the rest of the details from the party. It would have been a pleasant time if my heart wasn't shattered and my brain on overdrive, thinking how to prove any of it. It was about 90 minutes after the grand announcement that Margaret Williamson, the first assistant district attorney, came by and said Paul wanted to meet with his staff. Where Paul was an elected official, Margaret was the senior person who actually ran the office. District attorneys could come and go every 4 years. But Margaret was a permanent fixture. She was a very tough lady, but also highly respected for her honesty and integrity in the legal community. The older female lawyer was one of the main reasons Kelly took the position. I rather liked her. Margaret had been married for over 30 years to an electrician who supported her through college and now owned a nice-sized electrical contracting company. The two were devoted to each other. I always thought they were the model for Kelly and me. "Sorry to steal your wife away, Hoban," Margaret offered. "Paul wants to discuss the organization of the office once he is off campaigning." A moment later, they were both gone. I wandered away from a small cluster of other spouses who had been left behind for the meeting and made my way over to the other side of their large pool. opposite the patio where the party was occurring. There was a wicker chair swing hanging from chains. It was somewhat in the shadows, so people would be able to see me if they looked, but I wouldn't be obvious. In other words, it was a perfect place for me to try to gather my thoughts. I had been sitting down for less than 5 minutes when a voice intruded into my solitude. "So here's where you are hiding," a voice purred. I looked up just as Barbara slid into the wicker swing next to me. She settled in so she was seated facing slightly towards me without me saying a word. Her little black dress settled across her tanned thighs in a way that clung to her body, hinting at what lay beneath without revealing anything. Seductive but innocent at the same time. It said something about my state of mind that I noted this almost academically. "You look like a man with the weight of the world on his shoulders," she commended. I didn't really want to talk about it to my wife's lover's daughter, no matter how hot she was. We've been really busy in the office. A lot of audits are going on. I said to end the conversation. "Really?" Barbara asked in an interested tone. I just finished my last accounting course at school. We spent several classes talking about the use of forensic accounting in law enforcement. I thought it was fascinating, even in my grief. That surprised me. "Really?" I asked in a disbelieving tone. "Well, it's not sexy or anything, but it really is detective work to take all the right pieces of information out of a ton of other facts and put them together to get a clear picture. Plus, since some people are trying to hide that information, it gets even harder. Most people don't see it that way," I admitted. Barbara started going into a remarkable amount of detail on just what she learned in the class and why she enjoyed it so much. I have to say I was impressed. I've had people finishing internships at the firm that couldn't have spoken that well on the topic. Focusing on her words actually helped me set aside both her looks and, more importantly, the rage boiling deep inside me. I found myself slipping into my role as a mentor. It helped me put my emotional turmoil in the back of my mind a bit. "You really did enjoy the class," I remarked. "You seem to have an excellent grasp of the topic." Barbara blushed at my praise. For a moment, the pinup girl was gone, and I could see a sweet girl honestly touched by my simple praise. I've actually thought about going into the FBI when I finish school. My dad wants me to either become a prosecutor or work for one of his friends' law firms, but I don't think that's what I want to do. "You should follow your own dreams and not your father's," I advised. It was honest advice, not that I wouldn't be above spiking the dude's plans. I've done some work with the FBI when audits turned up something criminal. They're sharp people. Before Barbara could reply, Kelly stepped out of the shadows. "Here's where you disappeared to. You weren't doing anything naughty, were you?" she asked in a teasing tone. Barbara turned to face my wife with a brilliant smile. "We were just talking about Bob's job. We just covered it in class. I wanted to pick the brain of an expert." "Well, Hogan is that," Kelly said in a proud tone. I looked at one of his audit reports where an employee was embezzling money using his boss's lodge. Hogan caught that some of the transfers happened when the guy was on a business trip, but the lodges occurred from the corporate office. Most of us would have stopped when the boss was identified, but Hogan kept digging. I could have gotten a conviction on the employee on my first day out of law school. Hogan didn't really leave anything for the DA's office to do on that one. Kelly was beaming at me with pride on her face as she related this little story. That confused the hell out of me. How could she be proud of me and claim to love me while carrying on a 6-month relationship with her boss? A shadow of my confusion must have crossed my face because Kelly asked, "What's wrong, dear?" "Nothing," I said. "Just thinking about a problem." "We'll stop that. This is a party," Kelly admonished me. She barely drew a breath and said, "Hogan, you will never be able to guess the opportunity I've been given. Paul and Margaret want me to move into more of an administrative role since I plan on going out on maternity leave as soon as you get your job done. That way, when I go, there won't be any cases left hanging. I'll be working directly for Margaret." Something in my heart leaped at the thought of Kelly being away from that bastard, Paul. My hopes were dashed a mere second later. "I will have to travel occasionally," Kelly continued. I will courier sensitive papers to Paul on the campaign trail, so I won't be a part of his campaign, but I will still get to see some of the behind-the-scenes activity. That will be so much fun. I could feel my heart shatter all over again. I know I heard Kelly say she planned on ending her affair so we could have a baby. I could easily see her falling back into her affair and her excitement to be part of the campaign. And if she did get pregnant, who was to say it would be mine? Paul is about my size and coloring. Short of a DNA test, it would be really hard to know. My rage started to grow, but I clamped down on it. Now was not the time. Barbara started talking to Kelly about her new position and the campaign. The two were soon wrapped up in their conversation, and I was forgotten. I took the opportunity to pull myself together. After tonight, I would start to plan. I needed some way to counter Paul's political power, but frankly, I had no idea how to do that. The answer walked into my office 2 days later. Your 4 o'clock appointment is here. My admin called in through my open door. We're not allowed to call them secretaries anymore. I glanced at my Outlook calendar and didn't see anything booked. Before I could reply, she walked in. Barbara Evans. Hi, Hogan, she called as she walked in. Her long, dark red hair flowed down and over her shoulder. She wore a light sundress that showed off her gorgeous legs, with sandals, with straps that wrapped around her legs almost up to her knees. Her chest was demurely covered with no cleavage showing, but the material clung to her breasts in a suggestive fashion. 2 thin straps held up the dress, leaving her arms bare. I was speechless watching her walk in. I hope you don't mind, Barbara started. She closed my office door behind herself. I told Mary that we had an appointment to discuss my career and how Kelly works for my father. I rose politely from my chair. Hi and happy to see you. I was just working on some reports. I gestured for her to take one of the chairs in front of my desk. After she was seated, I sat down. What did you want to talk about? The happy face suddenly melted off Barbara's face. I think you know Bob. I saw it on your face when you talked to my father. I am so sorry that he's destroying such a nice guy. I was stunned. That was not what I was expecting. What are you talking about? I asked cautiously. Barbara grimaced. The fact that my father is having an affair with your wife? I slumped back in my chair at the bluntness of her words. Did you just find out? Barbara asked gently. I nodded. I am sorry. So, when did you find out? I asked. About 3 months ago, Barbara admitted. I don't know when it started, but I found out in February. I had gone home early one Friday and they were having one of their meetings at our house. I was having a late lunch with a friend from high school, so I just ran in to drop off my bags, say hi, and go. My father asked when I would be home, and I said after dinner. It turned out my friend got sick and couldn't make it. I grabbed some lunch and went home. I saw my father and Kelly having sex in her hot tub. I took pictures and even got them running naked back into the house. There was a foot of snow on the ground, too. You took pictures of your father having sex? I asked in shock. I also wondered if I could get copies of the pictures. It would really help with the divorce. As though she read my mind, Barbara reached into her bag and brought out a large envelope and placed it on my desk. Here are the pictures from that day and a few others, she said, pausing to smirk. My father has a security system installed in the house. The entire outside is covered, and several of the inside rooms have cameras. If you know the website and have the key fob and password, you can access it from pretty much anywhere. There is a thumb drive in there with video, too. I was in shock at this. Paul's daughter was handing over everything I would need for my divorce and to destroy her father. Why? I asked. The sad look on Barbara's face was replaced with anger. Because, she said in a quiet voice, I hate that man more than you ever could. I said nothing but waited. After a moment, she started to talk. My father met my mother when she was a college student. He was a brand new lawyer assigned to a sex crimes unit in Philly. My mother had come over from Ireland for school. Her family was well off, but were killed in a bombing in Londonderry. She came here to get away from the troubles. Her voice had taken on a soft lilt that she probably learned from her mother. My mother was dating some loser that hit her hard enough. She ended up in the ER. Kelly paused and placed a small book on my desk. It was fairly thick and decorated in green and lace. I found her journal. after she died, and she was something of a submissive. She liked having a strong man take charge. This jerk took it too far, and she ended up admitted to the hospital. Dad was assigned to the case. They met, the jerk went to jail, and a year later, they were married. Dad was always ambitious. He got a smart, beautiful woman with an exotic accent. Mom got a strong man that would protect her. I came along a few years later. Dad wanted me to do gymnastics. He thought having a daughter performing in the Olympics would do wonders for his political career. Do you know what ends most gymnastics careers? I shook my head and said, I never thought about it. Barbara smiled. They call it the 3 Bs, boobs, butts, and boys. I got the first one. I was told to do cheerleading and be the all-American girl. I didn't mind as I liked performing, but I realized by the time I was 16, I was merely a prop for my father's ambitions. Mom knew it almost from the start. Dad was having affairs almost from the time they were married. Mom knew and begged him to stop, but she was too weak to do anything about it. She felt trapped. She was a staunch Catholic, so divorce was out. Barbara paused for a moment to gather her thoughts, then continued. Sometimes I wonder if her poor reaction to the cancer treatments was a result of her unconsciously wanting to die or actively sabotaging her treatments. In any case, I was in the hospital with her when she died. The official story is that my father was in court winning a homicide conviction. He had the doctor change the time of death. In reality, he was actually sleeping with his assistant at her apartment to celebrate. He just trotted out Mom as his trophy, and the press loved the story of how they met. The heroic DA riding out to save the battered woman. The bastard even hit her himself more than once from what I saw. Why are you telling me all of this? I had to ask. Because you don't deserve this, Hogan. My dad, he's not a good person. After Mom died, he kept his affairs discreet until I left for college. That's when he started hosting meetings at the house, and they're not just for his job. He also has meetings for some of the charity groups he's involved with. I know for a fact he's sleeping with 2 other women from those groups, too. One of the poor women actually thinks it's true love and is planning to leave her husband. Is that what Kelly thinks? I asked. I know what I heard, but I'm still curious. Barbara shook her head and said, No, she seems to think it's just for fun. They say power is the ultimate aphrodisiac. Kelly seems to be proof of that. I heard her talking with my dad about some senator they met with, and how excited she was when she got back to Doylestown. I winced at the blunt comment. I even remembered the day. I came home to a wild woman, and it was one of the best nights of sex in my life. A cherished memory that is now sour, because I knew now that my wife had probably not even been thinking of me at the time. So what do you want? I asked. To her credit, Barbara looked me right in the eyes when she answered. I want you out of your marriage to that cheater. I want my father's career destroyed to the point he would never be elected dog catcher in a town full of cats, she said. I thought of just sending my stuff to the papers or even to the other party, but he has too many friends. I figured together we can make them pay. Won't that make it harder for you to finish school? She again shook that deep red hair. No, my mom left her inheritance to me as a trust fund. I haven't touched it, but if it came to it, I could pay for the rest of my schooling and MBA and still have a nice nest egg left. If your mom had that much money of her own, why didn't she take you and leave? She could have gone to Ireland beyond your father's reach. Barbara grimaced and replied, as I said, she was raised very Irish Catholic. She was taught divorce was not an option. Whatever else happened, my mom clung to her faith until the very end. It is the one thing that makes me think her death was unconscious rather than deliberate, since they also see suicide as the unforgivable sin. I have to admit, I couldn't see Barbara as anything but truthful. She said she wanted her father's career destroyed, and me having this information sure couldn't bode well for his ambitions. I couldn't see any way this could be a trap of some sort. If Kelly and Paul wanted to wipe me out, they could do it openly in court. This sneaky stuff was only for when you were desperate, like me. A plan started to take form in my mind. I would need Barbara to help with several items. If nothing else, it would tell me how committed she was to destroying her father. Okay, I agreed, but I don't want to destroy him by releasing these images or even naming him in my divorce. Barbara looked surprised at that and demanded, "Why not?" Her face flushed red in her passion, and she drew a breath to launch into some speech. I stalled her with a raised hand and explained, "I didn't say we wouldn't destroy him, but I don't want to have to deal with the bad press of being the husband in a political scandal. Instead, I want to destroy what he's wanted all of his life, his power and influence. With that, I can get a nice, quiet divorce that no one will care about." Barbara looked at me with shock on her face. After a minute, a sly smile grew, and she asked, "What do you need from me?" I smirked and replied, "I am going to do what I do best. Get me his financial records, personal and his campaign stuff. They got Capone through tax evasion. Having met your father, I have no doubt I can find something." Barbara asked, "And if not?" I smiled and said, "I can make some." Over the next 3 days, Barbara helped me gather the necessary information to bring down her father's career. Barbara and I were busy. She installed a keystroke logger onto her father's personal laptop and the home desktop. She also performed a full hard drive backup of his computer. We set up their security system to upload its recordings to a cloud space I knew of that was physically hosted overseas. For my part, I didn't bother bugging Kelly's phone. Thanks to Barbara's evidence, I didn't need anything more on that front. I did activate the GPS tracker intended for parents keeping track of children. It mostly just used cell towers for positioning, unless I sent the command to activate the GPS. I just didn't want her surprising me at home when I was busy with my work. I faked a groin injury the day after Barbara first came to see me. That gave me an excuse not to have sex with my wife. I never thought I would ever have to come up with an excuse not to have sex with my lovely wife. After hearing of the number of Paul's partners, I didn't want to take any more chances than I unknowingly had. Plus, I don't think I could have done it without my anger breaking out. On a side note, I did make an appointment with a doctor to be tested for STDs. Nothing showed up at first, but some of those bugs like HIV can take months before they give a positive result for antibodies. It was a randy, frustrated Kelly that left for her final rendezvous with Paul at the conference in Pittsburgh. Unsurprisingly, she was really excited to go. Leaving her hanging the last few days had her really keyed up. Some guys might have given her the goodbye sex as revenge. My problem was somewhere inside, I still loved her. I could never trust her again, but that didn't mean I didn't love her in some parts still. But I also couldn't stand the thought of being with her after what I'd learned. Thursday morning, Kane and Kelly were waiting with her packed bag, waiting for Paul and a junior lawyer from their office who was going to the conference with them. I wonder if the young guy knew he was their cover. "I will be home Sunday afternoon," Kelly said as she walked up behind me after dropping her bag by the front door. I was sitting at the table with my back to her, sipping my coffee. She wrapped her arms around me and leaned down so her lips were right next to my ear. "Hopefully you're feeling better, and we can get started on the little one," she whispered. Her tone could raise a dead man, and her smell took me back to more innocent days. I wanted to cry right there, but I managed to hold it together. "I will keep it iced up, so I'm all healed up," I assured her. I patted her arm and kissed her forehead. She moaned, "I wish I didn't have to go to this. It would be so much better to just stay home with you and be naked all weekend." "You can always tell Evans that something more important came up," I said. "It just slipped out." And by the way she looked at me, she had heard something in my tone. "What is your problem with Paul?" she asked in a startled voice. "First, you were rude at the party, and now you sounded like you hate the man." I forced myself to calm and shrugged. Honestly, I've seen too many hotshots like Evans that think he's untouchable and power incarnate. They're big fish in little ponds. They sell the illusion of power and get people to buy it. Like that mayor in South Carolina last year. Big, powerful guy embezzling from the city while sleeping with 3 married women. Now he's doing 10 years in the federal pen, and they are all divorced and publicly humiliated. I get the same vibe off Evans. If he gets to Washington, he'll be banging clueless interns in a week. But eventually the wheels will come off on his ride. And his crap will splatter over everyone around him when it does. Kelly was looking at me in shock. She'd heard me rant about him before, but I'd never linked Evans to it before. I probably should have kept my mouth shut, but it felt good to let it out. And while the marriage was over, I also felt it was fair to give Kelly fair warning. I still loved her, even if I'd never trust her again. Hogan, that's a horrible thing to say about Paul, Kelly protested. He's a good man who's done a lot for the people of this county. He's not like that. I heard an almost pleading tone in her denial. In timing that couldn't be planned, we heard the sound of a car horn come from outside the house. Paul had arrived. Kelly let out a frustrated sigh. She gave me a little glare that quickly faded into a mixture of regret and what almost looked like fear. "I will be home in 4 days," Kelly said in a conciliatory tone. "We can talk about this then. But be ready, love. We have a baby to start on." Then she wrapped her arms around me for a passionate kiss, a kiss I returned just as fervently. "Have a good week," she breathed out. "I love you." "I love you too," I responded. She grabbed up her bag and opened the front door. "Bye, dear," she called over her shoulder. "Goodbye, Kelly," I said. Then I shut the door. 30 minutes later, I left to catch the train to the city. Barbara and I had an appointment with the FBI. Turned out I had no need to manufacture any evidence. I would put Paul Evans' embezzlement skills at moderately clever. Barbara and I met in her off-campus apartment to review the documents she pulled off his computer. Fairly standard techniques on the whole. I estimated he had about $2 million stashed in an offshore account. At least that is how much he funneled to it. But I can't be sure it's still there because those records were not included. Most of that money came from a variety of small contributors that would not trigger IRS types. But why were out-of-state people donating to a County D's campaign? I managed to trace several of them to people with ties to defendants where the case was dismissed or a plea bargain was accepted with unusually light sentences. It was Barbara who found the biggest bombshell. The bombshell was found by Barbara. It turns out she was not an only child. Evans impregnated 2 other women along the way. One was born 3 years before his wife's death. The mother was one of his staffers at the time. The third was born 8 months after his wife's death to, get this, an 18-year-old volunteer at the hospital where his wife was receiving treatment. Evans was paying each woman $2,000 a month from campaign contributions as poll research consultants. Barbara was so angry that she almost destroyed her own apartment. That red hair really is a warning sign. By the time Kelly and Paul left, we had everything sorted out in Paul's records. There were still some questions, but we lacked the resources to access the information. So I wrote up all of the findings and scheduled a meeting with a senior FBI agent I had worked with out of the Philadelphia office. Barbara came along to tell him the story we had concocted. Barbara's story was that she had wanted to look at some real records after taking her forensic accounting class. She decided to take a look at her father's records out of innocent curiosity. When she noticed some irregularities, she called me because my wife worked for her father, and she knew of my expertise. Gary was an experienced professional. He knew there was more to it than that, but we gave him a gift-wrapped present so he wouldn't push. A corrupt district attorney in his own backyard. A corrupt district attorney who had just launched a U.S. Senate campaign. It was a career-making case that fell into our laps. We took a cab back to Barbara's apartment since she had a late afternoon class, and I walked to 30th Street Station for the train ride home. I was considering packing up my things and leaving when Kelly came home. Gary promised to expedite the case and obtain subpoena Evans' records by Wednesday. It wouldn't take long for word to spread about the investigation at that point. The bastard would find out how illusory his power was when all the rats deserted his ship. Kelly called me while I was on the train heading home. She said she called early because they were going out to a big dinner and she wouldn't be back to her room until late. I had no doubt that she had no intention of ever being in her room tonight. I made a few vague remarks, saying that was fine. She picked up on my distracted tone and asked what was wrong. I just had a meeting with some FBI agents about a case, I answered. I am on the train and the investigation is still ongoing, so I can't discuss it. All of which was completely true. It sounds like it really affected you, Kelly said, her tone concerned. Crap. Anyone I know? I grimaced. I've said too much already. The Bureau would have my hide if I say anything else. Oh, you're no fun, Kelly pouted. Don't worry, love. Your secret is safe with me. We said our goodbyes, and she was gone. When I walked into the house, it all just hit me. My marriage was over. Dating and married, we've been together for 10 years. I never expected to be single again, but now I was facing just that. In the end, I just sat on the couch and waited as the sun went down. I just sat and watched. I felt like I was watching my life sinking down over the horizon. It was many hours after the sun had gone down before I moved again. It was noon on Saturday before I emerged from my bout of self-pity. I'm not saying I didn't deserve to indulge a little, but I knew I needed to shake it off. Ironically, I was mowing the lawn again when I saw a BMW convertible pull into my driveway. I brought the mower to a stop while I watched Barbara emerge. The first thing I saw was her long, pale legs swing out of the driver's side. She was once again wearing sandals with a thin cord wrapped halfway up her calf. They always made me think of the ancient Greeks. As she stood, I could see her sculpted legs flex in a way that spoke of strength underneath her firm flesh. Sticking with the Greek trend, she was wearing a pure white toga-like dress that stopped at mid-thigh, but with 2 inches of lace at the bottom, allowing a few teasing peeks of her upper thighs. The dress was made of a light, silky material that hugged her curves and tended towards the translucent. Her firm breasts were held by a bikini top that was just visible through the dress. Her arms were bare, save for the light freckles that dotted her skin on her upper arms and shoulders. The dress only went over one shoulder, leaving the other bare. Her long red hair hung down in waves over those same shoulders. However, it was her gray-green eyes and that smile that captured my attention as she approached me. I killed the engine and greeted her. "Well, you look better than I expected," Barbara said. "I half expected to have to pull you out of a bottle, or down off a ledge." I snorted. I had many thoughts last night, towards both options. "Needed to be done," I said. "Plus, it keeps me distracted." "Not meeting with a lawyer?" she asked. I shrugged. "I did that on Tuesday before they even left. The papers will be ready on Monday." I arranged to take an audit at a customer in Austin and leave on Tuesday. Normally, travel for this type of assignment is for 3 days, and then I work remotely until I do my report. But this time, I'll be staying there for the whole 3 weeks. I shrugged again. I guess it's the coward's way out. I guess, but I don't want to be here when the whole mess melts down. I could see the agreement on Barbara's face. She knew this would put some focus on her too, as the bastard's daughter. "Well, I am glad you were thinking ahead," the redhead said, "but I've learned that's something you're good at." There was that smile again. "Now I can plan too." "Okay, so here's my plan," Barbara announced. "I'm gonna help you finish up with your work here, and then you're coming to my place. We are going to have fun, and you can even ogle me to your heart's content. I have a bathing suit that you're just gonna love." That last part was said in a voice that would have raised a dead man. I tried to rally. "Barbara, I'm still married," I protested. "And I don't think I'll be ready to jump into anything for a while." "You need to let off some steam before you explode," the sexy redhead insisted. "Besides, you know the old saying, what's good for the goose is good for the gander." The look she gave me was playful, wicked, and guileless all at the same time. I couldn't help but laugh. In one of those bizarre coincidences that prove the truth is stranger than fiction, we ran into Olivia, of all people. After I finished up my yard work, I cleaned up, and we went out for a late lunch at a nice restaurant. I wasn't really up for trying any revenge sex, but it was nice to get out of the house. Going out with someone as nice as Barbara, and who looked like Barbara did, would never be a hardship. When I pulled up, I noticed a certain car parked a bit closer to the restaurant. It was Olivia's. I always thought it was a crime putting OBX and Jersey Shore bumper stickers on a Mustang GT. I almost told Barbara to turn around and we'd find another place, but I didn't. Instead, I did something that was totally out of character for me. It was all on a whim. After all of my careful planning, something in me just tore seeing Olivia's car parked in that lot. I casually wrapped my arm around the beautiful redhead and ushered her into the restaurant without another word. I tipped the host to place us at a certain table. It was somewhat obscured, but was in plain sight when returning from the bathrooms. I sat Barbara facing out and settled myself into the seat next to her. She smiled when I took her hand. "What brought this on?" she asked with a cute little smile. "Not that I'm complaining." I laughed. "Remember me telling you about how I found out about my cheating wife, her friend Olivia? Well, her car is parked right outside." Barbara let loose a throaty laugh. "So I get to be the other woman?" "Oh, I can live with that." She leaned forward and placed an incredibly soft kiss on my lips. It wasn't a deep, passionate kiss, but rather one that hinted and promised so much more to come, a lover's kiss. Our meals had arrived, and I was honestly enjoying myself. The subterfuge was mostly forgotten as I enjoyed Barbara's company. Her sharp sense of humor killed me. I had never heard someone make a counting sound so dirty before. I just happened to glance over and noticed Olivia walking past us. I pointed it out to Barbara. "Oh, goody," she giggled. "I've been waiting to do this." With that, she leaned forward to kiss me. I found my hand being guided under the table and onto her leg. The skin of her thighs was incredibly soft, with firm, supple muscle underneath. The touch was electric. I could feel the heat radiating out of her panties. My hand slid forward of its own volition to feel the moisture there. I was so lost in the sensations that I was surprised when I heard Olivia yelling at me. "Hogan, what in the world are you doing?" She was screaming at me. "Who is this tramp? Running around on your wife while she's out of town? I thought better of you." I have no doubt the whole restaurant heard her. I released Barbara and turned to look at my erstwhile friend. "What is your problem, Liv?" I asked. "It's just a bit of carefree sex before Kelly and I settle down and have a kid. And can you keep it down? People are trying to eat." Olivia gaped at me like I'd smacked her with a dead fish. "What?" she started. "Oh, come on now, Liv. Kelly is doing the same thing. I'm sure she's off sleeping with her boss right now. She has been for months. So I reckoned it was only fair for me to sleep with the boss's daughter." I think Olivia almost had a heart attack right there. I felt Barbara start to giggle, so I gave her a little squeeze to keep her quiet. Of course, I sort of forgot where my hand was, so her giggle turned more into a groan of pleasure. "You know about Olivia?" stuttered out. "I know I'm supposed to be the faithful, clueless husband, while my wife runs around ably assisted by a woman I thought was a close friend of mine." Olivia winced at the scorn in my voice. "I know Kelly wanted one last taste of the strange before having a kid, kind of like that one last flame before we got married. If it was okay for her, what is your problem with me?" I had no information on Kelly having any affairs prior to Paul, but as the saying goes, once a cheater, always a cheater. I was taking a shot in the dark with my suspicion and wondered if Liv was off balance enough to confirm it. "She was, you know about that too?" she gasped. "Nope, but thanks for the confirmation," I answered. Olivia paled at that. "Go away, Olivia," I said. She turned and fled the table. We heard a commotion a few minutes later. That was Olivia leaving the restaurant. "Well, that was fun while it lasted," Barbara said with a little laugh. I really wanted her to be in there longer. Her smile caused me to blush. "Blush? You know she is probably on the phone with your wife right now," she added. Probably, I agreed. I get it 5 minutes before my phone goes off. However, it takes 5 hours to get home from Pittsburgh if she leaves right now. That gives us time for dessert, and still gives me enough time to get home and pack. "Sorry I won't get to see you in that bikini, like you promised." Barbara laughed again. "Oh, I think we can reschedule for that." She reached over to grab me by the shirt and pull me closer. "You know my semester ends in a week and a half," she murmured into my ear. "I've always wanted to see Austin." I barely grasped her words when her tongue slithered its way into my ear. Epilogue. Yes, well, things truly hit the fan. Kelly started calling me 10 minutes after Olivia left the restaurant. I listened to a few of her messages, and she was furious for cheating on her. That almost made me laugh. After an hour of her messages and texts, I blocked her number. I knew eventually she would just call from another phone. But she was driving back from Pittsburgh, so it wasn't like she could just ask to borrow someone else's on the turnpike. I went home and packed up all of my personal items, not just the stuff for my trip to Austin. I had the time. Within 4 hours of the encounter with Olivia, I was driving away from my house for what was probably the last time. I booked myself into a hotel near the Philly airport after dropping most of my stuff off in a storage locker until I could find a place to live. I talked to Barbara a few times on the phone. She was staying with a friend as her father was leaving furious messages on her phone now. I moved my flight to Austin up a day and was gone Monday morning. Kelly managed to call my phone a few times from other numbers. Now they were tearful rants of how could I do this to her, why would I destroy her career, etc., etc. Apparently, Olivia's initial screaming had gotten a lot of people's attention. Someone then posted a fairly accurate account on their blog and identified Barbara and me as the players. My comment about Kelly sleeping with Paul was also reported along with the fact that they were together in Pittsburgh for the weekend. That caused a big stir in the county political circles and the courthouse. I avoided most of the news out of Philly for the rest of the week. It wasn't until Friday that I got an email that told me what was happening back in Dorastown. Surprisingly, it was from Margaret, the senior manager in the DA's office. The older lawyer apologized for all that had happened. She knew Paul was dating 2 women outside the office, but knew nothing of Kelly's involvement. She also applauded my getting revenge by using the law against a lawyer. According to Margaret, it was an eventful week in the Buckdays office. On Monday morning, Paul was in the office attempting damage control and denying any improper behavior on his part. He claimed it was just his daughter's rebellion under the influence of a cheating husband. Tried to sell. Then on Tuesday, Kelly was served with the divorce papers on the grounds of adultery. The envelope was filled with pictures, DVDs, and a letter from me. Kelly's scream of horror when she read my note brought Margaret and 2 others running into her office. Kelly was slumped in shock in her chair, and Margaret spotted the pictures that had fallen out onto the desk. My letter to Kelly told her I never had an affair, but hoped she now had some idea of how I felt about her. I told her I couldn't be married to someone I couldn't trust, especially now that I knew she had been unfaithful before. Not much work was completed in the DA's office on Tuesday. Margaret was in Paul's office for a meeting the next day when 4 men in suits suddenly walked in. Paul was yelling at them for interrupting an important meeting when one man informed Paul he was under arrest. She said he was in complete shock when they cuffed him and walked him out of the office. They walked him right out the front door of the courthouse and past the reporters that had somehow been notified. I owed Gary a few beers for that. Margaret closed her email by apologizing for letting their behavior happen in her office. She also said to let her know if I needed anything, as I didn't deserve this kind of thing. I'm sure some of her email was damage control, but mostly I think it was Margaret being the moral professional person I always took her for. Now, all my plans for a quiet divorce were shot to hell because of my own stupid impulsive stunt with Olivia in that restaurant. The Philly news stations quickly got wind of Paul's arrest and the charges against him. As I told Kelly, this had all the makings of a summer novel. Sex, betrayal, revenge, and way too much angst. The news media loved it, and it was quickly picked up by the Hungry 24 news services. I avoided the worst as I was out of town, and they hadn't managed to track me down since I booked a second hotel room in a place 10 miles from the one listed on my itinerary at work. I had checked in there, though, so the reporters camped out around it trying to catch me. I did see on television that they were camped in front of my house. Kelly wasn't coming out, and they only got shots of my in-laws going in and out. Barbara had it the worst as the daughter that turned in her own father. She still had to go to class and take exams, so the media had a fairly easy time finding her the first few days. Then the school forced the reporters off campus as they were disrupting the students. It also helped when the 2 women who bore Paul's children came forward for their 15 minutes of fame. Her last final was completed, and Barbara slipped off campus and headed to the airport. The media was disappointed but not too surprised when she was a no-show at the graduation ceremony. After a while, the story slipped to a secondary news item and stayed there. It flared up when Paul's trial started, but he pleaded guilty to several charges, making him guilty of adultery. making him a 20-year guest of the federal government. Thankfully, his pleading guilty meant Barbara and I were never called to testify. Then it dropped completely off the radar, taking Barbara Kelly and me with it. Oddly enough, after all that publicity, my divorce did go through quickly and with the minimum of fuss. Kelly signed the papers 4 days after receiving them. I got a letter apologizing for what she had done to me and to us. She had sworn in her rage driving back from Pittsburgh that she would never forgive me for cheating on her. Finding out that she was in fact the only cheater, she realized how hypocritical that made her. She took my offer of a 50-50 split and just asked that at some point, when it wasn't so raw, I would agree to meet with her. So she could apologize in person. She closed by saying that she would always love me and wish me well. Heard later from her mother that she quit her job and moved out to the Midwest with an aunt. Taking down Paul did wonders for my career. The FBI gave me full credit in the press for the analysis of Paul's records. Since I was hiding from that same press, I was even more thorough on the Austin job and found not just the embezzler they were looking for, but a second one that they didn't have any indication of at the time. My firm promoted me and assigned me leadership of a team focused on white-collar crimes. And yes, some joker hung the label on the team as Hogan's Heroes. But the best part was when they assigned me an assistant, a recent college graduate looking to gain experience in forensic accounting. I've never enjoyed working late so much. And that bikini looked even better on my hotel room floor.